Welcome to my video presentation, To Virtualize or Not to Virtualize, My Decision to Virtualize My Server Environment by Mark Erminsky, class SEIS 620. I had a problem, or not a problem, but a decision to make a couple of years ago where I have to make the decision to refresh my server environment. The hardware was aging, and as you know, typical server life is generally 3 to 5 years. So I had a server rack that consisted of aging hardware, of a primary domain controller, which was about 6 years old, a secondary domain controller, 3 years, a mail server, and a production database server, 3 to 4 years old, 2 file servers, ages 2 to 3 and 4 to 5 years old, a print server at 5 years, endpoint protection and antivirus server, aged in about 5 years, a really old FTP server, and a patch management server, which was running about 3 years old. It's not really a problem, but it's a decision that everyone has to make. Is at some point in time, you have to replace this hardware, and I needed to make the decision, should I continue to replace with physical server hardware, or is it time to go virtual? So in an ideal state, with anybody, I would think that you would never want to replace hardware again, because it's kind of a pain in the butt. But you always know that even in a virtual environment, you're going to have to replace some physical hardware at some point in time, just not as much. The scope of my project, or to solve this problem, would have the following constraints: that I'd want to be implementing it within 6 months of making a decision, and I'd want to do it with about a $75,000 budget. And that would include any hardware, software, services rendered, required to set up, and any licensing that would be needed to license the virtualization software or anything like that. The domain of the project is not necessarily to improve performance, but that would be a nice side effect. But the only goal really here is to convert or to move all the physical server boxes to a virtual environment. The impact would hopefully be none to the current operations, where downtime would be minimal, and any users, they wouldn't really even notice the change. There'd be nothing to tell them that the server is now running virtual as opposed to physical. So the action statement is to review the cost to do this refresh with all physical boxes and compare that cost to what it would be to replace all the hardware with virtual hardware. The strategy is, it's not a requirement, but improving server performance is always nice. We're going to gain some redundancy. We're going to improve the reliability. We're going to make it easier to upgrade in the future, and hopefully we're going to reduce some operational costs. This is the server environment as it existed prior to the project beginning. You can see there's 10 to 11 servers there, and there's another server hiding underneath. Now you can't see it, it's kind of in the back because of the cabling. And here's some cabling in the back, which is kind of messy. So that's the current environment. What is virtualization? And this is a definition from Wikipedia. Virtualization in computing refers to the act of creating a virtual rather than an actual version of something, including but not limited to a virtual computer, hardware platform, operating system, storage device, or computer network resource. And continuing with the wiki definition, hardware virtualization or platform virtualization refers to the creation of a virtual machine that acts like a real computer with an operating system. Software executed on these virtual machines is separated from the underlying hardware resources. In hardware virtualization, the host machine is the actual machine on which the virtualization takes place, and the guest machine is the virtual machine. The words host and guest are used to distinguish the software that runs on the physical machine from the software that runs on the virtual machine. This is also a definition from Wikipedia. He defines full virtualization, partial virtualization, and para-virtualization. And full virtualization is pretty much what we're going to do here, and that means almost complete simulation of the actual hardware to allow software, which typically consists of a guest operating system, to run unmodified. Partial, I'm not real familiar with it, and para-virtualization, I really don't think para-virtualization occurs that much anymore. So why virtualize? There's a lot of benefits and reasons to virtualize. Direct cost savings. You're going to save money because you're running fewer boxes. It's pretty simple math. Less watts used, less money paid. You're going to use less power to run the servers. You're going to use less power to cool the servers, and you should see some direct savings. Of course, you're not going to see as much savings with my environment, which is only 10 to 11 servers, as opposed to an environment where they're running thousands of servers, but there's still going to be some savings costs. Because of the less servers, you're going to need less space, and so I don't need as many racks, and I'm not going to take as much space up in my server room. I have more room to move around. There can be quicker setups. I can provision new servers faster, so if I need to set up a test or a QA server, I can do it real quickly. I don't need a physical box to do it on. I can just fire up or spin up a virtual machine and set it up and configure it, and I should be testing in no time. There's some vendor lock-in issues. You're going to have more uptime, less downtime, because of just there's no hardware that can go bad other than the virtualization, the box itself, but there's no hardware like in a physical box. There's no disks that are going to go bad. There's no network cards that are going to go bad. You're not going to lose a RAID controller or anything like that. So you can benefit from application isolation, where you can set up a box just to run a particular application more easily. You can allocate the proper resources to that box. If you only need one CPU, you're not going to, like in a physical box that's got a quad core and you're only running a single application on it, you're not, wasting all that processing power for that application if it really doesn't need it. And same goes with storage and resources that way. So you can basically set up a box and configure the box to the application instead of just installing the application on a box. So you're going to gain some benefits if you have any legacy servers or legacy applications. For instance, in my environment, I have a production environment, and there's some production machines on the floor, such as a press or a motor tester or something there that's running on a box that's running Windows 95, and nobody knows where the configuration disks are, how the machine was set up. You can just virtualize that box and run your equipment off the virtual server, and you won't have to worry about what happens if that machine goes down and you can't find the disk and reconfigure it. So you gain some benefits to that. There's migration and failover, where say your virtual device, you do some updates on it, you can migrate all your servers to the other host, from one host to another host, and there's really no downtime if you have to do some maintenance on your ESX hosts. You also gain the benefits of future migration to the cloud. If at some point in time you need to upgrade your hardware for your virtual servers, one of the options might be to go to the cloud, and it would be really easy at that point in time to just migrate your virtual disks to the cloud. So what vendors do I choose? There's a lot of vendors out there for hardware. There's a few vendors out there for the virtualization products. So pick a good business partner to help you make these decisions. They will have the proper tools that you need to determine what the proper hardware requirements will be how much power, how much storage you need, what the best system setup is going to be, and they'll recommend based on what you want. And my particular business partner offered me Dell, HP, or IBM hardware, and it was all made on decisions were all made on cost to keep myself within budget. So just pick a business partner that you trust, someone that you worked with in the past, and the decision will be easy. What virtualization company do you choose? What vendors are out there that serve virtualization software? There's VMware, Hyper-V, Zen, and Virtual Iron, which is really non-existent anymore. It was bought out by Oracle, and they're kind of pushing the Zen product now. So really there's only the three, and the decision there is really based on personal preference. I chose VMware. So this is my new hardware that's going to replace all the old hardware you saw on the rack in the previous instance. Storage devices. If you ever have damage, like a tornado or flooding or some water damage, if you separate the racks geographically within the facility, it's just a good disaster policy. So the choices I made were ultimately I chose a business partner that I trusted. They provided me with multiple options with regards to what hypervisor and hardware to choose. In the end, I chose VMware ESX51, set up in a 2-node configuration, running on HP DL330 hardware. Each ESX server, I have 2 RAID groups set up in each with hot swap spares. If a disk goes bad, you just pop one in, pop one out. The vCenter is configured on its own physical server, and the total final outlay of dollars was under budget by about 15%. So I did not have my business partner provide the full conversion for me. I had them walk me through the setup. They provided me with tools and training. They helped me set up a couple of physical or virtual servers from physical boxes, walk through that process, set me up with some templates, and I continue to move physical servers to the virtual environment. It's a learning process, and I chose to do it that way. So some of the benefits of virtualization or VMware, I described a little bit earlier, is you eliminate over allocating storage. So you're not wasting servers. I mean, I guess if you have a particular server and it's got a quad-core processor and a 3 terabytes of space, and you have just one application running on that only requires a single processor and a limited amount of RAM and only 300 gigabytes of space, what VMware helps you do is allocate the proper resources to whatever application you're going to run, and helps you save money and spread that cost savings over the entire cost of your VMware. So you're not over provisioning, and you can thin provision also, where you can allocate or future allocate a certain amount of storage or resources, and your application is only going to use what it needs up to that point of allocation. So you're not reserving 100 gigabytes of data store to your application if you don't need it. It's only going to allocate the storage that you need if you thin provision. So you gain a lot of benefits there. This slide just basically says if you have a disaster, the time to recover is going to be much shorter in a virtual environment, and that goes true. That is true also for if you're just setting up a new machine too. It's not going to take you that much time to set it up and configure it. The virtual configuration is going to be much quicker. So there's a lot of benefits. It's easier to administer, quicker updates, reboots are quicker. You don't have to worry about hardware failures on physical boxes. It's easy to set up. Maintenance becomes simplified, and it's a new experience. There's new things to learn, and go through that slide. So here's the credits. Basically, Wikipedia and VMware were great resources. Thank you for watching my presentation.